A big hello to all the viewers. Welcome again to the D-Life In channel. I am Shashikant Iyengar, the host today. I am a D-Life In Life member and also volunteer. And for all those who are watching this program, this is not a medical or a nutrition advice. It's just a sharing of information. People are requested to take the guidance of their doctor and a low-carb nutritionist for any change in their present diet. And also, I wish to declare that there are no financials attached to this session. All are free of cost for getting the genuine information across the Indian diaspora. So D-Life is a community platform for low carbers. It's a platform for those suffering from diabetes, obesity, PCOS, and other metabolic syndrome, including even hypertension. And D-Life has over 250 success stories. And they also have more than 1,200 dishes, which are all low-carb dishes, low-carb Indian dishes. So D-Life was founded by Anup Singh, who is an engineer from IIT Roorkela. And recently Anup Singh and D-Life has been recognized and awarded as icons of India by the Outlook magazine for pioneering low carb in India. They also launched a diploma in low carb nutrition last year for those wishing to help others in a systematic and scientific manner. So viewers, a very big warm welcome to Marty Kendall from Brisbane. Hi Marty, how are you?
Hey, great to be here. Real honor to be chatting to you guys in India.
So welcome to India virtually. So viewers, we are going to have something very interesting. Marty is also low carb, but Marty doesn't belong to any different camps. You know, he belongs to a single camp called nutrient density. He wants to show us how to maximize your nutrient density in whichever diet you follow. No doubt he's tilted towards low carb, and he's also tilted towards higher protein. So, along with that, his main focus and intensity is on, on how to maximize the nutrient density. So let me introduce Marty. Marty is an engineer who seeks to optimize nutrition using a data-driven approach. Now, this is very typical of an engineer. An engineer doesn't go by dogma, doesn't go by belief. They go by data. So number crunching is something which is very important to them. His interest in nutrition began 18 years ago in an effort to help his wife, Monica, who is a type 1 diabetic. But since then he has been working on a systematized approach to nutrition tailored for a wide range of goals. And over the past 5 years, Marty has been sharing his learning in optimizingnutrition.com and has developed Nutrient Optimiser and data-driven fasting to guide thousands of others. These are all master classes which people can actually join, and they have a Facebook group. And Marty will help you online how to dial in various macros, how to optimize your nutrient intake. And viewers, let me tell you that personally, even I have attended masterclass of Marty and Nutrient Optimiser, and I've gained, tremendous knowledge on, how to optimize nutrition within this low carb ketogenic diet which I follow. So welcome, Marty. Big welcome to India.
Yeah. Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, it's a real honor. I love your big, wide smile. It's great to be welcomed by you. Thank you.
So Marty, to begin, please tell us your background. Though I had introduced you as an engineer, but please let us know about your actual background.
By day, I'm a structural engineer and civil engineer, and I used to design bridges and bikeways and do planning to determine motorway alignments, and that got me into multi-criteria analyses, which is sort of a way of balancing different factors numerically to say this is our goal, this is what we want to prioritize. So this is which motorway route we choose or which bikeway we choose, and so that has sort of led me into that sort of approach flowed over into my nutrition world. And it's been a really good basis I see things through numbers and I enjoy numbers. So as you said, I have to see the numbers to believe it. So that's enabled me to sort of cut through a lot of the dogma and the diet wars and the belief about nutrition to understand what really works for most people most of the time.
So Marty, how come you came into this nutrition field in a very big way?
Yeah. I sort of fell into it accidentally. I was going to share my screen if that's okay. I've got a few photos to tell the story, so you don't have to look at my face. Please. For the whole presentation. So I'll just so I got married 18 years ago to Monica, and I didn't understand diabetes at the time. And I suppose she didn't really understand type 1 diabetes after having it for 20 years or so. And I suppose she hadn't really been given a lot of great guidance by the various doctors and nutritionists and endocrinologists. And just, she'd always say she'd rock up and they'd say, how's it going? Yeah, your HbA1c is a bit high, should get that down. Here's your medication, rock out, come back in 6 months. And that was pretty much all the guidance she got. And I remember asking her, hey, what's a good blood sugar? And she said, I don't know, maybe 6 millimole. I'm not really sure. So that's where we started out. And then we started thinking quickly about having children and realized that that was a big deal to get her blood sugars dialed in to have a healthy pregnancy. So I sort of fell into it. This is what my life looks like now, trying to manage her blood sugars through using a closed loop continuous glucose monitor that's connected to her phone, which changes her insulin all day. But it's been a long journey over 18 years to get to this point of trying to understand what foods influence insulin and blood sugars and trying to quantify that so I believe it and can sort of prioritize it and optimize it. And these are our children that we've got now. They're big teenagers. Mikey's taller than me and Jazzy's 16 and at the moment, she's offered a UN digital diplomacy summit. She's just like a wannabe politician and public speaker and school captain. So they're thriving now, and it's really good that that's happened. So I suppose that's the motivation, is to have a happy, healthy family initially, and then just fell into it. I suppose this is our before and after. And I had my own history of type 2 diabetes in the family. 35, I realized I was getting pretty fat and needed to do something about it. So decided it was time to try a few different things. And I tried a whole range of different diets, and some of them worked to some extent, but not as much as I wanted to. And you get online and there's all these arguments and discussions. And I met some really amazing people like Ted Naiman and Lewis from Keto Gains and a whole range of other amazing people. And you learn a lot from those people, but I've tried to develop my quantified system to sort of cut through the noise. So yeah, that's my origin story. And yeah, it's been a whole lot of fun.
Really, it's really a fantastic journey, and it is thrilling to see HbA1c of 4.6.
Yeah, well, that's her blood sugar, and that's
Yeah,
sort of the Bernstein
I mean,
ideal. Yeah.
I think it's very difficult for for mainstreamers, and especially those on type 1 can ever imagine that they can have a 4.6 HbA1c. It's really fantastic. The way you helped her manage her type 1 diabetes, just fantastic. So what actually got you into this nutrient density part? I mean, it is very unique, and we don't see anyone talking on nutrient density.
Yeah, well, I started looking at the food insulin index, which we'll talk maybe a bit about later. But once I started looking at the lowest insulin foods, I realized that they were quite low nutrient density, low protein, very high fat. And coming from exposure to Rob Wolf and paleo, realized that they needed to have nutrients as well. So I found some previous work by Matt Lalonde and Joel Furman that I tried to mimic, and realized that it had limitations of the way they'd quantified nutrient density. So I went, hey, let's do this myself, and built a big spreadsheet and tried to balance nutrient density and insulin loads together. So to say, well, for my wife, she needs foods that stabilize her blood sugar that still have nutrients. So it's sort of two priorities. It's not just I want low carb or keto or high fat, or it's like you need to find the right balance for you depending on where your blood sugar sits. So that's how I fell into it. And yeah, I've got a screen.
Yeah,
I suppose what is nutrient density is an interesting question. This is a chart from one of our she's a vegetarian in the current masterclass that's just finishing up. Nutrient density is basically how many nutrients of all the 34 essential micronutrients you're getting per unit of energy. When the best one we've got is calories. It's limited, but it's the best one we've got. So this chart here shows all the vitamins in green and the amino acids in red, and you've got omega-3 here, which is the essential fatty acid, and it shows that she's meeting 100% of all our optimal nutrient intakes per 2,000 calories. So it's a measure of diet quality. And if you're wanting to, our body craves nutrients, and we go in search of not just protein, but all the vitamins, minerals, and essential fatty acids until we get enough. So if you're eating foods that contain a low nutrient density, you just keep on eating and eating until you get what you need. So if you can supply your body with foods that contain more nutrients without as many calories, you're going to be satiated and energized, and all the bodily functions that depend on those essential nutrients are going to work a whole lot better.
Fine. This really, a fantastic chart which was shown. You are taken out from a vegetarian who's reaching 100% of the all the micronutrients. When I was in your master class, I really struggled. I really struggled to reach this 100%.
Yeah, this is Karen, who's number 3, and there's in this masterclass, there's 5 people who have got 100%, and you know how hard that was. We've set this bar very, very high. So and City up the top here is eating organ meats and head cheese and making all this really weird and wonderful stuff, and meanwhile Karen's eating a vegetarian diet and doing really well, and Kelly's an omnivore, and there's all these people, regardless of their dietary approach or preferences, can still get the nutrients they need with the diet through chasing the harder to find nutrients, which are the ones at the top.
It's really fantastic. And when you say vegetarian, what exactly is it? I mean, we in India, vegetarian means those who have dairy. We don't have eggs. I mean, that is how the classical definition of vegetarian in India is. So we don't have vegans. We don't. Veganism is not from here. I mean, just to inform you, that is how it is. And then there are certain people who eat eggs, and then there are meat eaters.
I suppose my definition tends to include the eggs and the dairy, and you can get a reasonable amount of protein if you include the eggs and dairy. But you can still do it without that, with just the dairy.
Yeah, so any vegetarians in India, we tend to depend upon dairy. So a source of protein could be paneer, it could be cheese. Paneer means Indian cottage cheese, and then we have cheese, and then we have yogurt, and maybe some will supplement on whey if if they don't get adequate protein. I mean, that's an option which are kept open.
Dairy is actually a very highly bioavailable form of protein, which is really good. It compared to a lot of plant-based protein, it's very bioavailable, so you don't need as many calories to get that. But you potentially need to dial back the fat sometimes if you want to lose body fat. So that's sort of the balance you need to find depending on your goals.
I think that again becomes a challenge, but however, we'll learn, we'll keep learning. Now, what your soul told about is the insulin index. The food insulin index is very, very interesting. So, you can just throw more light
as
on
I
this.
said, that's where I started out. So I'll just share my screen again. There was a food insulin index paper done back in 1997 at the University of Sydney, and I came across this and I thought, wow, this is the way I can find out which foods will help Moni stabilize her insulin, because the problem for people with type 1 diabetes is that they inject insulin. They inject a lot of insulin for the carbohydrates in the food, and their blood sugars then come crashing down. They feel hungry, so then they have to eat again to get out of that low. And it's this constant roller coaster, and that the amplitude of that roller coaster is what drives hunger. And if you over inject the insulin, you just need to keep eating more, and they often get double diabetes because they're injecting too much insulin and they become obese at the same time because of the excess insulin that they're taking because of that roller coaster. So I thought, hey, this is really cool. The food insulin index is a measure of the area under the curve insulin response to foods over 2 hours. So you can see here that glucose in black raised the insulin and then comes back down to 0 at 2 hours. And then milk, which is a fat and carb food, doesn't raise it as much, but it's still elevated a little bit at 2 hours, which I think is a really important thing to note, that this 2 hour mark doesn't take into account the full effect of the food. And that's probably a limitation of this, but you can still use it really powerfully, but when they only had 28 data points back in the 1997 paper, it's like, what does this chart mean? It's just like, how do I make sense of this? Jelly beans are bad, eggs are good, peanuts are great, but how do I make sense of that? So in 2014 thesis, they came out with 128 different foods that they'd logged to expand that 28 foods that became really powerful. And you got like butter down one end, which has a very low insulin response, and jelly beans at the other end, which have a really high, sharp, immediate insulin response. But again, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. If you just look at that, you go, well, maybe I'll eat butter and avoid the jelly beans. So I plotted those data points, carbohydrates versus food insulin index. You can see there's sort of a trend with carbohydrates, but down here you've got the high protein foods that still require insulin. So I thought, well, maybe Dr. Bernstein talks a lot about needing to dose insulin for protein for people with type 1 diabetes. So when we factor in protein, protein requires about half as much insulin over the first 2 hours. So then that gives a much better fit. And then if you factor in fiber and fructose, which both sort of reduce the insulin requirement, you get a really nice fit. So this is really, really cool if you're injecting insulin, you want to stay out of this end. You want to avoid the cornflakes and cereals, basically, and the fruit, and stay down here with the low insulinogenic foods, which will help you stabilize your blood sugars. And the benefits are that it's really good for helping you calculate how much insulin you need and identify foods that will stabilize your blood sugars. But again, it only considers the first 2 hours, which is really important. And all foods require some insulin over the long term. And really the majority of the insulin produced is really to hold your energy in storage. So the bigger you are, the more insulin your pancreas is producing, no matter what you're eating, to keep your fat in storage. And the other downside is that the lowest insulinogenic foods also have the lowest nutrient density. So we need to find a balance point for that. And just to elucidate that point about the basal insulin, if you're a type 1 diabetic on a low carb diet, probably 80% of Moni's insulin across the day is just to just hold her energy in storage. If she didn't take the insulin, all her energy would leach out into her blood in glucose, ketones, and free fatty acids. And within a few weeks, she'd just disintegrate, basically. And that's what your pancreas is doing and my pancreas is doing. But a lot of the time we just focus on these little boluses after food. What we really need to do is not just manage the after food. It's about finding a way to manage your body fat levels so your pancreas isn't always producing so much insulin to hold your body fat in storage. So you see here in this chart, there's pretty much a direct relationship between your BMI and the insulin your body is producing. So I think that realization really helped me see that, the bigger problem is satiety. It's not just insulin, it's how do I eat in a way that enables me to be satiated, not as hungry all the time, so I can reduce my body fat levels. So I then reduce energy toxicity, which reduces insulin toxicity, and then all the good things happen from there. But it's not just insulin toxicity, it's energy toxicity that you have to manage as the upstream thing.
Marty, a couple of friends here attending, they will ask you a question later, which I think
That'd
you
be
can
great.
preempt.
Yeah, bring on the heckling.
We'll just preempt with this chart which you just shown. Can you just show in the chart where does whey protein lie?
Oh, whey protein.
Yeah. Is it there in the chart?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
This question will come later, but so I'm just preempting.
Yeah, I suppose I don't think it's on there, but whey protein will stimulate an insulin response, and if you're injecting insulin, then you may not want to have really fast-acting proteins like whey. But at the same time, there's nothing wrong with whey if you need to supplement your protein and you're very active and need to grow. I always say, whole foods are always better. whey is sort of a processed food, which is less satiating and less nutritious. But if you need it to bump up your protein, and it's a great bioavailable source of protein. So yeah, I use a fair bit of whey for a snack occasionally when I'm hungry, and it smashes the hunger, and it's probably a good thing overall. And yeah, so that's the thing. You shouldn't get too caught up on the short-term insulin response to the food. You need to think of what satiety, what nutrients does it bring me, and over the long term, if it brings you satiety, it'll bring down your insulin levels.
Right. So Marty, please elaborate on satiety. How do we achieve satiety?
What is
For
satiety?
So for me, my understanding is, just to preempt, we'll just get back to what you want to say. That maybe satiety we achieve by having an optimal combination of fat, protein, fiber. So I don't know how it is. So please
Yeah.
tell us more about
Yeah.
satiety in form of nutrient density.
Yeah. So satiety is about how hungry or how satisfied do I feel after eating these foods. So imagine you eat a donut or French fries or this sort of croissant. They taste really great, and your brain goes, "This is fantastic," because you get a dopamine hit from both the carbs and the fat at the same time, and you want to eat more of those foods because your body's sort of programmed to want more energy. So it's sort of this binge response that it causes. So there's sort of low satiety foods, but at the other extreme, you've got the higher protein foods and higher fiber foods and bulkier foods. So foods that have more protein, more fiber, and more bulk water, are less processed, require more energy for your body to digest them and process them and turn them into ATP, tend to be much more satiating. So we did I'll do the share screen again. We did a analysis of all the people tracking a nutrient optimizer to see which foods enable them to eat less compared to their basal metabolic rates. So what you can see here is that as you increase the protein percentage, people tended to eat less. So most of the population is sitting on this 12 to 15% protein, which aligns with the lowest satiety. So the vast majority of people are sitting up here optimizing their diet for maximum intake. But if you increase your protein percentage progressively, then you tend to eat less. And like jumping from 15 to 50% overnight is going to hurt. Your body will go, "I can't get all the energy I need from this protein," and it'll rebel, and your binge instinct will kick in. So that's why we always say, let's dial things up slowly. Let's go from 15 to 20 for a week, and then 20 to 25. And if you're not making progress anymore, 25 to 30. And then if you're up to 40, you're pretty much, that's our stretch target. So you can see here, we've set a stretch target. Let's try to get you to 40% protein over time if you're trying to maximize satiety. So when it comes to carbohydrates, we did a similar thing with 500,000 days of MyFitnessPal data. So these are people tracking in MyFitnessPal, and you can see that it's the foods that are a combination of fat and carbs together. The croissants, the donut, the cookie, that we call those the bad carbs a lot of the time, but really they're bad carbs because they're vegetable oils, sugar, and refined grains all smashed together in a way that doesn't happen in nature. But if you tried to eat rice, potatoes, broccoli by itself, you couldn't eat much of that food, but not many people actually stick up here. And there's definitely a satiety response that once you get your carbohydrates below about 30%, you get a good satiety response, and you tend to eat less. So that's why a lot of people find themselves, I went low carb and I didn't have to count calories and it was magic, and I lost weight without even trying, without tracking. So that's the magic of low carb. And you see here that most people, in terms of what most people eat, it's that middle ground that we all gravitate back to, because if it's available, we love those foods. So I think that concept is really powerful, that it's not, if you were able to stick with a very, very, very high carb diet, which nobody is, you probably do okay, but everybody gravitates to that middle zone. You can see over time, in terms of macronutrient split, the world, well, this is America, but the rest of the world has followed America. the fat intake is crept up and the carb intake has crept down, and so we've got a similar level of fat and carbs together, and obesity's just risen. And you can see over the last 50 years or so, carbs have come up, and over the last 100 years, fat has come up, and together you've got a lot of extra calories in the system, maybe 700 extra calories per person compared to 100 years ago. And no wonder the obesity epidemic is just spiraling. So if you can just, not eat fat and carbs together, you're going to be satiated and find it easier not to overeat, because we always eat to satiety. We always eat till we don't feel hungry again. So you need to find a way of eating that doesn't leave your lizard brain triggered and go and give you more and more food.
So Marty, basically what you want to say is, we are just slotting two of the macros together, carbs and protein as energy. And it appears that, this energy dense food can offer lower satiety, and we keep on eating.
Yeah, definitely. Carbs and fat together. You can think of carbs and fat like carbs are fast burning energy, fat is a slow burning energy. And when you combine them, you just fill up both energy fuel tanks in your system. And your body loves that because it prepares you for winter, but winter never comes in our modern society where we've got unlimited access to food.
So I think, I can very strongly correlate this with, most of the Indian snacks, for all the viewers, most of the Indian snacks, the deep fried snacks which are available, they are very, very low in protein and very high in carbs and refined carbs, and also very high in fat, and that too bad fat. It is never made with good fat. First of all, here in context of what Marty says is, Marty is not bothered about good fat, bad fat. Basically what he says is there's an excess fat and there's an excess carbohydrate. Both are energy form. But the typical thing is we find that while we blame all the Western junk food, they are to be blamed. But a lot of the Indian junk food are also to be blamed. Most of the samosas, kachoris, vada pavs, most of those typical local Indian kachoris and all we have, they're all filled with refined carbs and refined fat, totally energy dense and very, very poor protein percentage. So no wonder it's adding to the obesity.
Yeah, and the fat that comes with the protein is generally great. So if you're getting your fat with the whole food protein, no need to fear fat at all. Maybe you want to choose leaner cuts if you want to lose body fat. But if you're trying to manage and stabilize your diabetes and don't want to lose weight, then most people can just eat real food that comes with a bit of fat, your full fat dairy and whatever, and just enjoy that. You don't need to worry about bad fats, but the bad fats is just those nutrient poor added fats. And the vegetable oil content of the world has just exploded since we worked out how to harness the power of fossil fuel fertilizers, throw them into crops and just harvest the same field and the same crops over and over and over and over again, and all you're adding is more fertilizer. There's no nutrients coming out of that soil anymore.
So monocropping, as well as refined omega-6 oils, which of course we are going to have a session tomorrow extensively on that. But however, in this context, this is how it is. That's how the world is changing now. And, we need to be a little alert. So Marty, please also tell us about the macronutrients. You just told us about, protein, carbohydrate, something about, we're also curious to know about fat, what do you have to say?
I suppose they all play some role, but you don't want too many of them, especially all at the same time. So protein is primary. I mean, protein, the word means proteus, which is from the Greek, which means primary. So even it's embedded into the word, it's the primary macronutrient. It's most correlated with satiety, and it's highly correlated with nutrient density. So if you're getting adequate protein, you're going to be getting a good amount of nutrient density at the same time. Carbs are the fast burning fuel, but got limited storage for them. And then fats are the slow burning fuel that got lots of room to store them. And I wanted to share this graphic that a lot of people have found useful. And you've sort of got your blood glucose, little fuel tank, your liver glycogen, which is a bigger fuel tank. You got your free fatty acids in your blood, and then you got your body fats. So you can see here that there's a line here that goes down that represents oxidative priorities. So to burn off to get to your body fat, you sort of need to deplete these fuel tanks first. So the nice thing about a low carb diet is it depletes your blood glucose and then depletes your liver glycogen, and that does a really nice job of stabilizing your blood sugars, because when you're on a roller coaster of blood sugars, you feel when they're falling, you want to eat immediately, and you just, like with type 1 diabetes, potentially you'd want to overeat, and so it's much easier to control your appetite when your blood sugars are reasonably stable. They don't have to be flatline, but stable is good. But potentially some people, and I myself, that photo I showed before was when I was doing hardcore keto and butter chugging and trying to get my ketones higher and higher. And at that point, you're just filling in this fatty acid fuel tank and just jamming more fat into that, believing that because your insulin is low, your ketones are high, you're going to lose body fat, but you're just filling up that fuel tank. So what you need to do is to deplete both the glucose and the fat a little bit by backing back on both the carbs and potentially the fat if you're not losing body fat, to get to that last body fat fuel tank. And that's where the magic happens of greater satiety, body fat loss. And once you drain your body fat, any fuel that comes in can then be absorbed easily, so it doesn't back up in your system. And that's the issue with diabetes, really, is once your fat, your adipose tissue becomes overfilled, all that fuel just backs back up in your system because you've got excess adipose tissue, which is your primary storage organ for all that energy. So I really like Roy Taylor's personal fat threshold of obesity as once you exceed your body's capacity to store the energy that's coming in from your diet, it just backs up in your system. So you need to find a way to it's not just lowering carbs, it's also finding a way to lower body fat with greater satiety that'll allow you to lower that body fat. So that's my thoughts on macros.
So it's something, very vital point which I touched, personal fat threshold. And, that is something which we see in India. I think we all have a lower personal fat threshold.
Yeah.
We all basically very lean people.
Yeah.
And very few percentage of us can actually get, visually obese. I mean, most of us will consider ourselves very healthy and lean. However, you'll see a lot of protruding bellies. We have a lot of belly fat, which is seen, and that's why measurement like BMI may not be very useful in India. When I was diagnosed as a diabetic,
the waist to height ratio is much more important to measure your diabetes and overall health risk.
Because that is one of the measurements they also do for various things, including obesity or diabetes. So when I was diagnosed with diabetes, so I was actually below that BMI threshold, but our waist to hip ratio was was over the limit. I think that is where a very vital point you touch, personal fat threshold, and so that's why many apparently lean people they get diabetes, and once we exceed that energy threshold, because if you see classically, maybe in the olden times, if you really see the dietary pattern, maybe it was slightly bit more protein and bit more fibrous vegetable and a little less of all this carbohydrate and fat. But now we tend to exceed that, this energy dense food which we get, it's making us obese, so much so that, even small kids, they also suffer from fatty liver. The excess energy is going to be stored in, liver, as liver fat, of course, and then the fat gets filled in at various levels. So that's
and that's the dangerous fat, is when your adipose tissue, your belly fat fills up and then flows over into all your vital organs, and that's where the real damage happens. So people who can gain a lot of body fat and get really obese are really blessed in a way, because they've got lots of room to store that excess energy before they become diabetic. But you may be lean, but if that energy is overflowing into your bloodstream, you're in trouble.
And if you typically analyze a lipid panel report of any of the Indian patients, you will typically see a very high triglyceride. So it is said that the Indian phenotype has high triglyceride, low HDL, and not high LDL. LDL classically is not very high, which is seen. Though nowadays, as per the the association, they have reduced even the LDL level. But but that is okay. But then TG remains typically very high, and people don't understand why it happens. They just say that it is Indian phenotype. But probably this correlates with what you say, the excess energy which you're taking. The fat stores get filled in, and there's a backflow. It cannot go in anywhere, so it stays in the blood.
Yeah, it's just simply energy toxicity due to the
Yeah.
nutrient poor diet that has a low satiety value. That's because it's so we love to buy foods that just taste good to us and give us this amazing dopamine hit, and the food manufacturers go, this is the cheapest thing we can sell you. We can put food colors and flavorings in it to make it taste nutrient dense, and we love to sell it to you. So it's a win-win situation, other than the diabetes epidemic, which is going to bankrupt us all.
But then that is how it is. The generation wants to enjoy life. They want to enjoy tasty food, and they're willing to pay a price also. They know that one day they're going to be in trouble, and they're already all set to pop in a few pills and then continue their lifestyle.
But
So
popping the pills just manages the symptoms. It doesn't fix it's not a cure at all. It's just symptom management. And that's, the whole medical system is geared around symptom management, injected insulin, statins. It's just managing the markers. It's not managing your actual metabolic health, which is related to what you're eating and your muscle levels.
I think that's where engineers like you come in. You try to address the root cause, why it happens. You keep going in. You keep asking why, and then you keep going backwards, and then you try to find what is the root cause.
Yeah, and it annoys me at the moment because so many people are talking about that. They were talking about ketones. Now they're talking about insulin toxicity, and Ted and I and a few people are talking about it's energy toxicity. It's energy toxicity. You need to find a way to eat that doesn't just lower your blood sugars and insulin or stabilizes your insulin. You need to address that energy toxicity, which is upstream, which is all about protein and nutrient density.
I think, at this point, I like to just, tell the viewers that basically Marty is not against fat. He's all in for whichever natural fat which comes along with the food. He's just against this, adding a lot of fat, or maybe butter checking, or putting a lot of butter in coffee or something. So maybe he's against, but he's all in for that natural fat which comes in the food.
Yeah, definitely.
He also believes in giving carbohydrate low, around 30 grams. He's a very firm proponent of increasing a protein percentage. So Marty, that's how you pushed me to increase my protein percentage, very gradually during the master class, almost reaching 30-35 percentage, which was very high for me from the typical 20-25. So,
yeah, I think you were losing weight, but you also saw yourself losing a little bit of lean mass, and we said let's increase your bioavailable protein to prevent the loss of lean mass, and that's where the magic happens in a low carb diet.
Yeah, and the way you dialed everything properly, it was really beneficial. Now, coming back to this, in your nutrient density approach, which are the different diseases that that people got rid of or could help? What is your experience from all your masterclasses?
I suppose that the first thing to say is that everybody needs nutrients, regardless of whether you've got cancer or MS or diabetes or whatever. If you just dial in, eat more foods that contain those harder to find nutrients, you'll do pretty well. But if you wanted to dive into detail, I've got this book called The Nutrient Bible, which is an amazing resource, and up the back it's got 1,000 different symptoms and all the nutrients that are related to it, and it's primarily geared to supplements. But what we did, I'll just share my screen. We made a resource where you can say, let's say diabetes, let's say type 2 diabetes, and it'll bring up all the nutrients that are related, that deficiency symptoms correlate with type 2 diabetes. And then you scroll down, and these are all the foods that contain more of those nutrients. And then if you wanted to click on, let's say lentils, you click on lentils, and it brings up a breakdown of that food, the macros, the micros. And this is the one I really like. You can look at, maybe your viewers want to check this out. You can look at, if you ate 2,000 calories, which is about a day's worth of food, these are the nutrients that it'd give you in terms of the recommended daily intake. So lentils are lower in vitamin D and omega-3, B12. B12 is harder to find. Omega-3 is harder to find in plant-based foods particularly, but you're getting a good amount of protein from those lentils. So that's a useful resource. Yeah, but every condition, every disease ties back to its unique micronutrient deficiencies. But if you just, like I showed you before with that nutrient fingerprint chart, if you chase the harder to find nutrients, then you're going to do pretty well to manage any condition you've got, but also avoid ones of the future. So yeah, your body just needs all the essential micronutrients. You need all your B vitamins to burn carbs and fat to actually use the fuel you eat. And if you don't have them, if you're just eating pure energy from refined vegetable oils, high omega-6 oils, refined sugars, refined starches, then you're not going to get all those. Lots of people get beriberi because they're eating bleached rice and refined grains, and it's a terrible situation, and there's a lot of fortification to try and manage that. But the best way to do it is just to get nutrient dense whole foods as close to nature, as close to the ground as you can get. So
I think you have quite a lot of books which are all tailor-made for different conditions, like diabetes,
yeah,
hypertension, cancer. I think I've seen various books. In fact, I got a couple of books myself, especially
thank
for
you,
those diabetes.
Where's...
all very, very interesting books you have, specifically tailor-made for those conditions and the nutrients which you feel that which you think, or as per data shows, that are beneficial for those conditions.
Yeah, we've created 26 different recipe books tailored for, and if you need low carb or blood sugar management, or you want low carb and fat loss or maximum nutrient density, we created a whole range of different books. I was going to show you the vegetarian one, just to show you what these nutrient dense foods look like. So everything's bright and shiny and colorful, and so we tried to create recipes that contained more of the harder to find nutrients on a vegetarian diet. Within that vegetarian, we've even got a vegan plant-based one, because plant-based people need nutrients as well, regardless of their belief system. So, and then at the back, we've got a bunch of links to recipes online that show the breakdown. So there's 150 recipes that align with that goal. Yeah, so it's been a fun little project to build a bunch of recipe books, and we've got, if you look at the maximum nutrient density, you see that it's tailored to try and get all of the harder to find nutrients. And if you look at the vegetarian approach, definitely a little bit harder to get B12 and maybe omega-3 and some of those nutrients on a vegetarian approach. But if you focus on foods that do contain those nutrients, you're going to be doing a whole lot better.
Do you recommend any supplement in such cases, if, like, for example, B12, if vegetarians cannot reach?
Yeah, that's a great question. I suppose the first protocol that we recommend is, look at your diet, and you can track. We've got a 7-day free food tracking challenge where you can track your diet in Chronometer. It'll upload it into Nutrient Optimiser and analyze it and tell you what foods and meals will help you dial those harder to find nutrients in. And if you work on it, you can't achieve that, then by all means add a supplement if you can't actually achieve that. But we see a lot of people saying they're saving $500 a month through realizing that they no longer needed supplements because they could eat food that gave them the nutrients they needed. And they realized that when they quantified it, they could save all that money without needing the subs.
I think that's an extensive database. You have actually managed to gather, and you have actually developed so much information on various nutrients. Possibly the biggest database on food insulin index, I think.
Yeah,
I think
tried to analyze it in a way that is useful. I think nobody's really done anything with the food insulin index that helps, because I think the people that developed it realized that it led them to a low carb ketogenic diet, and they went, oh, we can't promote that. That's not what we're all about, and that must be wrong. So at the time, 5 years ago, I thought, let's shout this from the rooftops, because I think we found the solution to helping people stabilize their blood sugars, and which is so critical for people, especially injecting insulin with diabetes.
when anyone asks me on food insulin index, so I just direct them to your site. Go and visit Marty's site, and then you'll find a lot of information on this. So, what I want to ask is, can you tell us about various tools you have developed? Do you have any tools which can help us, some calculators? Or see, we know that food insulin index is there.
Another shameless plug. We're just updating the website at the moment, but there's if you go to the blog section, we've got a bunch of free tools. So there's a list of personalized food lists. So if you click on that, it'll open a number of different food lists that you can download, the food list that's tailored for each goal. So there's a pescatarian, I think I've got vegetarian there somewhere, but plant-based. So there's a whole, and then different approaches for different conditions, from acne and hypothyroidism and anxiety, and all the different nutrients that are related to that. We've got a macro calculator, and a nutrient deficiency quiz, which you can, that's Nutrient Optimiser. So you can do a quiz in Nutrient Optimiser to find which nutrients you need more of. A 7-day diet analysis that I mentioned before. So you can it'll guide you through collecting a food and chronometer. And then at the end of it, it tells you what your nutrient fingerprint is. NutriBooster, this is a really cool tool. So if you say, what are the foods that contain more B3 and EPA, DHA, all the omega-3 acids, you then scroll down and then find all the recommended foods. So you can actually identify precisely what nutrients you need. And then there's a bunch of different food lists for different conditions, and you can type in, let's say cancer. There's a whole bunch of different cancers and the nutrients that are related to those. So it's been a whole lot of fun, and we're nearly finished building this Swiss Army knife of nutrition, and can't wait to really start promoting it. So thanks for helping us get the word out there.
All these calculators are available free of cost for us to browse?
All those tools are free of cost. We've just got the recipe books and the masterclass and data-driven fasting that are courses that we hold your hand through them, as you know.
So can you just tell us, in very short, how do you think, we can optimize our nutrition in India? How to see, as I told you, we are vegetarians minus the eggs, only dairy. So what could you, briefly, what do you think you can tell us on, how to maximize nutrient density?
Yeah, lots of people do really well on a plant-focused diet. So, I'm all for green, non-starchy veggies. Or everything that's green and leafy will be really beneficial, and they're really hard to overeat those foods. So just, eat as many of those nutrient-dense, non-starchy veggies. If you've got diabetes, then or insulin resistance, you definitely want to avoid the starchy carbohydrates, the things that grow below ground, the potatoes, rice, all those sort of tubers. That'll help you manage, and then not as nutrient dense. If you need the energy because you're really doing a lot of explosive activity, maybe they have a role, but most people aren't doing that much, to be honest. So definitely the dairy, and if you want to lose body fat, then maybe think of dialing back the fat components and maybe look for the lower fat, higher protein. You can get lower fat, higher carb dairies, which you definitely want to avoid, but definitely look for the label that says it's got more protein grams than fat grams, and the carbs are quite low. So that's sort of what you need to look for, the higher protein forms of dairy. And dairy is a really, really bioavailable form of protein, which is fantastic.
So Marty, please tell us about all your couple of master classes which you have. Just throw some light on Nutrient Optimiser as well as DDF.
So we've got the 6-week nutritional optimization masterclass that you did and had fun doing, and it's I showed the leaderboard before of all the people competing for maximum nutrient density, and people get really excited about maximizing the nutrient density, and everybody else in the world saying, oh, you can't get nutrients from your food, you have to take supplements. I'm going, look, we've got hundreds of people smashing it here. You can do it if you just use the right tool. So we've tried to create the tool to do that, which is the nutrient optimizer. So how that works is you do have to track your food to know what you're currently eating. So you do that for a week. And then in the second week, we look at your protein, make sure you're getting enough protein. Not, you don't have to have massive amounts, but a lot of people, especially as they're coming from a low carb keto focused diet, maybe aren't getting enough protein. We then look at your carbohydrates. If your blood sugars are elevated, we want to dial back your carbohydrate intake to stabilize your blood sugars to a healthy level. And then we look at fat. If you're really active and you need to, and lean, then adding more fat in is a great idea. If you're looking to lose body fat and reverse insulin resistance, then dialing back the dietary fat is the final step there. And then we look at micronutrients, making sure you're getting the minimum amount to prevent diseases of deficiency. And then in the last week, we strive for optimal nutrient density and go for these stretch targets, which some people achieve and some people don't, but that's okay, because you don't have to be at 100 to be alive and healthy, and just moving the needle up a little bit is definitely a win. And then we've got data-driven fasting, which is my new little toy that I'm having a whole lot of fun. We're finishing up a masterclass tomorrow with 270 people, and then we're 2 weeks into a data-driven fasting challenge with 806 people in at the moment. So this is just blown up because it's just an easy way to fast. So what people do, they track their blood sugar before meals, and then they get a trigger, which is the blood sugar you need to wait to get below before you need to refuel. And then that trigger decreases and you wait a little bit longer until you need to refuel. And then if you refuel with, nutrient dense, higher protein foods, you're more satiated, so you can go for longer, and wonderful things happen. That the trigger starts to drop and the degree of difficulty starts to ramp up. You can see Jane, who won the last challenge. You can see her, this is the trigger in blue. So it just continually ratchets down from about 85 to, she got down to about 65 milligrams per deciliter. So that was the blood sugar she was waiting for before she ate, but she was still eating one or two times a day, which is a lot more than these extended fasting people who go for days and days at a time, but then are really hungry, so they overeat. So it's a way to find a negative energy balance over the long term. And it seems to be really effective to reduce the waist to height ratio, so that bad visceral fat, adipose fat that people really is dangerous. So because it focuses on your blood sugar, it lowers your blood sugar so you can burn that fat, and just getting great results. So if you think of your blood sugar as a fuel tank, you're basically waiting until your blood sugar drops below your current low level. You don't want to drive it to empty, because you'll just binge, and I nearly ran out of fuel on the motorway the other day, and I saw 0 kilometers to empty and rushed off the motorway and found the nearest service station and filled it up. I didn't care what price the fuel was. And that's like when we eat, when we get really hungry, we just go, give me the chips, the chocolate, the peanut butter. And when you're really, really hungry, you have no discretion of what you eat. So we try to help people dial it down slowly. And then when they eat, they don't want to see their blood sugar go up too much. Otherwise, we say, hey, you need to dial back your carbohydrates. So that's a really nice way of finding your carbohydrate limit. And then over time, everything goes down, and just getting some insane results with people with really quick fat loss, weight loss, and people are loving it. So yeah, that's my new toy, and I'm loving that. And it's just great to see, I suppose, after my wife struggling to get good diabetes advice, being able to help people with our learnings that we've had to learn through, this is what I wanted to learn for my family. It's getting out there and helping people and cutting through the noise with the data, and just having a whole lot of fun. Hey,
I just saw your video today in Facebook. I think, you interviewed the person from whom we were inspired to start this GDF group.
Yeah. Laurie was
Yeah.
lovely, and I wrote an article 5 years ago, and then she found it and put it into practice and got her ideal weight, and then went, "Hey, who are you? And let's chat." And so I went, "Okay, I need to develop this into something more." So over the last 9 months, this has just exploded. So yeah, it's a whole lot of fun.
Very, very interesting. So, Marty, thank you very much. I think
Yeah.
that you have provided us totally different facet to what we do. It's totally different angle from the usual low carb, usual keto, which we keep fighting about. You're talking about nutrient density within that space itself. A small example is when I was in a master class, I was finding that I was not reaching that mark level for copper. So I
Mm.
just added four cashew nuts. I used to avoid that because it was high carb, but however, just adding that four cashews, I was able to reach that optimum level of copper
That's
without
great.
significantly adding any extra carbohydrate, staying within that 30 gram, which was
Yeah.
recommended. So
Yeah.
a few more micronutrients, I managed to bump up using, maybe mushroom, almost daily, use 100 gram of mushroom and then bump up a few micronutrient level, which I never used to bother. I was so stuck up on very few foods that I realized that, we need to have variety of foods, something within our
Mm.
own range. I mean, within our own food group, which I use, just adding spices, just adding,
Yeah.
maybe some spices like, just add up some ginger, add up a little more pepper, you can bump up your chromium. So, the
Yeah.
few things,
Yeah, and
which
that's
I
the
have
thing with
learned.
Indian food. The spices are incredibly
Yeah.
nutritious, and you guys eat a lot of spices. So that's a great way to get a lot of those micronutrients that most of the world are struggling to find. And there's an amazing book called The Dorito Effect, where it talks about taking garbage food and just adding colors and flavors to make it taste like your amazing Indian food, which is full of flavor from real nutrients. So yeah, it's add the spices to add that flavor, and you'll be so satisfied and getting the micronutrients at the same time.
There are a lot of nutritious food which is there in our kitchen or even in our backyard, which we just don't realize,
Yeah.
while being, in a rabbit hole of, a single, single nutrition paradigm. So
Yeah.
there's something which is expanded, and I very strongly recommend, especially, all those who are into low carb keto and those who are, practicing as a nutritionist, they should undergo your masterclass once to understand what actually is nutrient dense food and how do we really dial in, how do we really manage this. So this is something which is very important. So
Yeah.
thanks, Marty. So Marty, I will just open up for question and answer,
Yeah.
from
That'd be
all
great
those
to
who are
hear from
here.
everybody.
So I'm unmuting everyone, you know so if anyone wants to ask any specific question, uh, they're free to ask Marty.
They're stunned with silence.
I hope, I have actually given the option of unmuting for everyone. So anyone wants to ask any question, or they can just type in.
Shashikant,
Yeah.
Bhaskar here.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry I seem to be there every meeting asking questions,
No,
but
no,
this
you are
was so
welcome. No, no, you are welcome.
interesting that I'm just amazed at the level of commitment Marty has. Anyway, my question is, could you
Thank you.
identify uh, nutrient dense Indian food and proteins and just list it out for mere mortals like us?
Yeah, it's based on at the moment, it's just based on the USDA database. But it'd be interesting to go through, and it's harder to find the nutrients for the specifically Indian foods, but maybe we could work together to develop a nutrient dense low carb version of Indian foods. That'd be really cool. We'd love to do that.
Marty, I suggest you have one more section of Indian low carb, uh,
We can
and
do an Indian low carb book.
yeah, I mean, where because our proteins are are very limited. Maybe
Yeah.
we from D Life we can actually help you and find out which food, and then see the
That'd
moment
be
you
cool.
say vegetarian, you are including eggs, which may not be suitable for many Indian communities. So Indian
Mm.
community specifically, we are towards dairy. So if you can develop something with dairy
Yeah.
based and lot of non-starchy vegetables, nuts, if you have a special section, that would be very helpful.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we might develop a food list that suits specifically your situation. That'd be cool. And also the soy protein is bioavailable as well, so probably whey is better, but the soy protein powders
something
actually
we don't prefer
bioavailable.
much of soy, but maybe
Yeah.
we will see soy into. I mean, that is the option for vegans. That's because they avoid even dairy. But within dairy, how much you can do, and maybe add up little whey protein, and we reach that optimum protein level.
Yeah.
So maybe we can develop something.
That'd be great. It'd be great to get.
Thanks, Bhaskar sir, for giving this
question.
idea to Marty.
Yes, my pleasure, Shashi, as usual.
You can ask Marty about your favorite question also if you want.
No, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all.
Okay. Yeah.
Anjali's already put me off that.
Okay, fine. Take care. Any more questions? Anyone can unmute and ask. Anjali?
Stunned with silence.
I think Anjali is not here. She is the one who will ask maximum questions, so she's not here.
Yes.
I think she's a little busy with some other priority. Fine.
It's okay.
Fine. So if there are no questions, we'll end up. Anup, you want to ask
Hi,
something?
give us some time to
Hi,
digest
Shashi.
all
Kishore
this.
here. Hello.
Kishore, yeah, Kishore. Yeah.
Hi, Marty. Thank you so much for the wonderful session.
Oh, thank you.
So recently I came across about this refeeding during keto or anything. So can you give your input on refeeding and how it is going to affect us during the keto diet? So if you can give us your input, it will be great.
Yeah, wow. Very interesting question. I suppose from a keto diet perspective, my primary goal is to stabilize blood sugars, not necessarily get ketones elevated. Ketones tend to be a side effect of a high satiety diet, but adding a lot of extra fat can, if you're trying to lose body fat, not be ideal. So you just need to, as we talked about before, dial the dietary fat in. If you've still got a fair bit of body fat on you, and elevated glucose, you don't necessarily need to refeed. But if you get to a very, very, very lean situation and your blood sugars are very, very low, then your metabolic rate can slow a little bit. And bodybuilders tend to use sort of carb cycling. There'll be keto for really hardcore keto and smash themselves in the gym to the point that their blood sugars are through the floor and they've burnt all their body fat, and then they get so fatigued that they need to refuel with carbohydrate again so that they can fuel themselves in the gym. But I mean, 99.9% of us who are not really high performance athletes and trying to get down to very lean body fat levels probably don't need to worry too much about that refeeding. So most people don't need to worry about it, but there can be a role, just like we talked about with the satiety chart with carbohydrate. If you jump to eat only low fat, rice, potato for one meal in a week or occasionally, you're not going to overeat those foods. But if your blood sugars are elevated, then you don't really want to go there. So if you know you've got diabetes or pre-diabetes, it's not something you want to play with. Hope that helped. More than confused.
Yeah, Pramila, you can ask.
Yeah, first of all, Marty, I'm amazed at your level of analysis. You've taken nutrition analysis to a very different level. My question here is, for people who are interested to do one meal a day, Omad, do you think it is nutritionally a good way and where we can achieve a optimal nutrient density by doing one meal a day if they are requiring a drastic weight loss?
Maybe not. We tend to see it's hard to get, if you wait until you're really hungry, you tend to go for, I don't know about you, but I go for the peanut butter and the yogurt and maybe some sneaky carbs and whatever, that your lizard brain kicks in really hard when you get really, really hungry. So it can be hard to get all the protein you need in one sitting because it's quite a lot of protein, especially if you've got less protein dense foods if you're eating vegetarian. So potentially 2 smaller meals a day can be better. And with the data-driven fasting, when people are losing weight, a lot of the time they'll start with 2 meals a day, and once they get their blood sugar trigger lower, they use that to discern whether they're going to have that second meal. So sort of alternating between 1 and 2 meals is probably a better approach if you're really trying to lose weight. But each of those you need to prioritize, maximize the protein percentage in those meals.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, cheers. Good question.
And personally, I think in Indian context, doing 1 meal a day is really difficult, and we'll run into protein deficient state, and possibly you're losing lean body mass. I don't mind OMAD, maybe few times, one or 2 or 3 times a month. But going totally OMAD throughout a month is, something which I'm totally against. And personally, I prefer at least 2 meal, and calculate your protein fat accordingly and put it in your 2 meals. And, I think we'll be doing great, and especially since most of us have lean body, we are little thin frame, we don't have much fat carrying capacity. Also, I'm terribly against OMAD. Frankly, it's not a sustainable one. 2 meals, yes, excellent. We can very well do. I mean, that is my personal view after assessing many things.
Yeah, fully agree with that.
Anyone wants to ask any more questions? Fine. Anup Singh, you want to ask something?
No, it's all over.
Fine. So Marty, thank you very much. And
so much.
this was a great session. You coming and sharing with India your perspective of nutrient dense food and how it can help satiety, and how it can help various disorders like obesity or diabetes, and the fantastic food insulin chart which you have, and those fantastic tools which you have are all unparalleled,
Thank you.
everyone is going to get it free of cost, so they can just go and see. It's something which you have done, something great across the world, so what you do is not restricted to what we call as the Western world, but down in India we can also take full advantage of everything. And best of all is all your programs are available online, so anyone sitting a remote corner of India also, they can also participate in online program. Just log into Facebook, and having an email ID is enough.
We have these Zoom chats in the master classes, and all my greatest friends are these old ladies in all over the world, and it's great. I love it.
Unfortunately, the chats is something which I can see only the recording, not that. 2:30 a.m. in the night was very difficult for me. However, that was something very, very enjoyable. So thanks, Marty, and maybe we can have one more session.
That'd be great.
Some of the different topics, and Marty is also known for his recent book. Can you tell about that book, Marty? Just in brief, just in a few words.
Big Fat Keto Lies. It was basically it's an inflammatory title, but it's all the things about the keto movement that I think need to be refined. So I'm definitely a massive fan of low carb for all the reasons we talked about, but there's a lot of belief in keto about chasing elevated ketones, and energy balance doesn't matter, and nutrient density doesn't matter, and all these things that I sort of, let's address that through the lens of nutritional optimization. So it's a really good opportunity to demonstrate how nutrient optimization can apply to keto and really any dietary approach from wherever you are. So it's been fun to write that, and people who I respect a lot liked the book, and that's enough for me. But
Thank you, Marty.
Thank you so much. It's been great to chat.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.